Hey guys, welcome back to Live with Lexi Howell. My name is Alexis Monet Howell, and I am so excited that you guys are here. And I have another special guest with me, TJ Wallace. And y'all, this conversation is going to be so good. I'm so excited. And you guys have been rocking with Live with Lexi Howell for over a year and a half now. If you don't know much about it, it's really just having conversations with people about Jesus, and it's a fun time. So I've got, again, TJ Wallace with me, and I am so thankful that you're joining me, TJ, 100%. Like, thank you for being on Live with Lexi Howell.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really pumped about this conversation, really pumped about what you're doing in our community and for young people and for women and for all the good stuff that's going on because of you saying yes to the opportunity. So I am excited to be here. It's going to be really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's so funny that you said like me saying yes to this opportunity, because I thought the exact same thing this morning. I was like, Lord, this would not be possible had you not influenced TJ to say yes. Like, because of your yes, we get to have a conversation today. And I think that's just so beautiful about the Lord. It's like what's on the other side of our yes to him. And there is beauty, there's responsibility, and there's also difficulty on the other side of our yes. So the fact that you said that is just amazing and really confirmation of what I was talking to the Lord about this morning. But I really want to get into all about your life. Let the people know who you are, what you're about. We're definitely going to talk about influence and leadership. But before I get ahead of myself, because I tend to do that, I'm going to pray us into this and then we'll start chatting. So everybody pray with me. Father, I thank you so much for your desire to see your son and your daughter have a conversation about you, to encourage your people about influence and about leadership, and to meet us where we are and encourage us where we are so that you can receive the glory that you deserve. We're so thankful, Holy Spirit, that you're here and that you're going to speak through us, and you're going to tell us when to speak and when not to speak and what to say, and open the hearts of the people that are listening right now to receive your word, to receive your truth, and to receive good things that only come from you. We ask you, Holy Spirit, to again hush us in the things that we should not say, and to speak volumes and speak boldly in the things that we should say for your glory, for your name, and only for honor and praise that goes to you. Bless us, be with us. We love you, Jesus. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, so again, our topic for today, influence and leadership. And before I even get into you sharing, TJ, who you are and what you're about, I really want to share with everyone listening and watching right now how we connected, and how we even get the opportunity to have a conversation. So normally, whenever I ask someone to be on Live Alexi Howell, like I ask the Lord, he gives me a person, I contact them and see if they want to join. Then after that, I'll send them questions. But with you, you do not know this. So here's what happened. But with you, the Lord gave me your name, and I instantly wrote down almost 10 questions to ask you. And it was very different because I've been doing this for a year and a half, and I knew how it normally went, and the Lord changed it, which made me believe that you were going to be on Live Alexi Howell. Well, in our humanness and fleshly ways, I was waiting for the right time, also waiting for your response. And the waiting kind of had me wavering. And I think that's a word in and of itself, of like the waiting. But I knew something was different because I got 10 questions for you before I even asked you. And so I wrestled with the Lord on, hey, is TJ supposed to be up here? Like, is this what you want? Even though he did it in a way that I knew you were supposed to. So I wanted to share that because sometimes what we're used to the Lord doing in our life changes. And then the waiting kind of gets us wavering, but still the Lord is faithful. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say
That's
with
awesome.
that, which is just amazing that you're here and the faithfulness of the Father to like get you to say yes. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, and we'll get more into your life in a couple of questions. But just introduce yourself to the people who don't know you.
Sure. So, my name is TJ Wallace. I am the creative director at Temple City Church in Selma, North Carolina. I'm married, been married for almost 10 years, going on 10 years. Crazy. That's insane to say. Yeah, so been married going on 10 years, got two kids. We got a 7-year-old son, his name is Zeke, and a 1.5-year-old little girl named Covey. And they are amazing. They are nuts and they keep us on our toes. And man, I have been in ministry for 12 years now. Pretty much, and I'll kind of get into the story, but I've been in ministry since I was 18 years old, full time. A few seasons where I kind of took, some time off here and there, but for the most part have been on staff at churches or in consulting or traveling, something ministry related. And that looks like worship. I've been a worship leader for a long time, a youth pastor, and now a creative director, which I've kind of always dabbled in the creative stuff, but never really been like the head of a creative department until now. And man, I just love everything about ministry, everything about creativity and influence and leadership and culture. And those are the things I'm super passionate about. So, kind of in a nutshell, that's who I am. I like to tell people I'm probably the most average golfer on the planet, and I love fashion. So yeah, those are a few key things to know about me. If you ever want to play golf, I'm not that great, so don't judge me. Great.
Yeah, golfing is not my thing. Sports are not my thing, but I know you're into basketball, and I think your son is a little ball player too. Is that right?
Yeah, so I actually I grew up playing basketball. I played a year of college basketball at Mid-Atlantic Christian University. And so now like I'm 30 and out of shape, so I don't really play a ton, but I've got kids and my son, we're huge Duke Blue Devil fans in our home. And so basketball is like king around our house. Like if there would have been a Duke game today, I would have had to reschedule this interview. Like that's it's that important to us. So we love basketball, and so Zeke this year wanted to play rec league, and I'm coaching his team, his 8U team, and I'm also coaching a 14U team with Corey, who is our worship pastor and youth pastor here at Temple City, and one of my best friends, and I'll talk about him later. But yeah, so we get to do a lot with that. I think one thing that I've learned in life is that you have to do something that refreshes your soul. And a lot of people, when they get overwhelmed or they get like stressed out, they tend to like veg out. And what I tell people a lot is that sleep does not equal rest, because your body can rest, but your mind and your soul, if they don't rest, it doesn't matter. And so for me, I don't know how much you know about like the enneagram, all that stuff. Like I'm an enneagram 8 wing 7, and so I'm what they call a maverick. I'm a challenger and an enthusiast. And one way that I tend to get refreshed and get recharged is by doing something I really enjoy doing. And basketball is like top of my list. So I was like, well, if I can't play much anymore, coaching would be a fun, opportunity. I've never coached before, outside of just like, small little assistant coaches here and there, but, to actually like be coaching head coaching a team is really fun for me. So I'm really excited about it. We've got our first practice tonight. So really gearing up for that and excited about the season. So yeah, it's fun. So
that's awesome though. Like a lot of what you said, first of all, you're like already preaching, which is fine. I mean, should have got a pen and paper and just like prepared my soul, but I didn't. So there's that. But what you said was so good, which is we need to refresh ourselves sometimes. And we can't just keep going. And I think even in the culture that we live in, it's always go, go, go. I remember sitting with Scooter Murphy at a time that I was like just running so fast and trying to accomplish so much. And he was like, we live in a world that is just fast food forward, right?
Yeah.
Like everything is fast. The microwave can cook your meal in 3 minutes, right? And then when it beeps once, we're already ready to get our food out. And just the world that we live in is so fast. And when it comes to living for Christ, it's the complete opposite. Like Jesus walked everywhere, which I mean, in those times, like they didn't have no cars, so that's fine. But it's just he took his time, yet he still fulfilled his promise. And I think even in what you're saying is you can still fulfill the things that the Lord has placed on you to do, the fun things, the spiritual things, all of that, but you still need moments of rest. And we see that with Jesus. And I think even practically what you're saying, like you love basketball, you're out of shape. I don't believe that, but that's what you say. So, the coaching thing is what you do. And I think it's finding those practical ways to refresh yourself, to step away from the work, to step away from even the striving that we can step into at times and saying, I need to read a book. I need to go and like hang out with a friend or whatever it is for you. As far as Enneagram, I'm not that great with knowing what Enneagram number is what, but I think I'm a 2-wing 3. Or depends on the day, I'm a 3-wing 2. So it's helper and perfectionist, I think.
No, so you would be the achiever. It would be the helper and the achiever.
Well, that
So,
makes sense.
yeah.
So it's a
But
struggle in
it's
and of
still,
itself.
it's very, I would encourage people. I'm not really big on like finding your identity in anything outside of like Christ,
Yeah,
so a lot of people, they'll look at the Enneagram and be like, oh, I'm a 5, wing 6, that's who I am. And it's like, well, that's not really what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to raise your self-awareness so that you can, the goal is to become like a little bit of each number of the Enneagram. And a lot of people don't know that. So, 8s are typically super like in your face. They like to debate, they challenge everything. And I am that way. And I used to use that as an excuse to argue with people or to debate with people or to just, whatever, like tell you my opinion. Like you hear people like, oh, I'm just real. Like I'm gonna keep it real and I'm just gonna tell you what I think. And it's like, yeah, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. You know what I mean? And you can't use that as an excuse. Like at the end of the day, people say, well, that's just my personality type. Well, it's like, well, you're not called to your personality type. You're called to Christ.
Come on.
And so but I do think that the Enneagram is super helpful. I think it's helped me learn a lot about myself that I couldn't really put into like a structured thought. And so it's helped me learn a lot about myself, and it's helped a lot of other people learn how to work with me, or like my wife be married to me, or whatever. And it's helped me learn a lot about other people too. So if you're watching this and you don't know the Enneagram, I encourage you to look into it. It's super helpful. And same thing for you, Alexis, because
for sure,
I think you would really like it. I think you would.
For sure. I know I've definitely taken like a couple of quizzes that they have out there, but it again depends on the day, how I'm feeling, where I'm at as to what I am.
Yeah,
at
I
that
understand.
moment. So
I understand.
But dude, we're not even at the second question, and there is so much good things already that you're speaking, and it's all experience and personal convictions, pretty much, like knowing, hey, I'm an 8, but I don't have to like operate myself in this way or manner, and knowing my identities in Christ and operating in that structure, but just being aware of how I am, or how I'm a little bit built and that of others, so I can communicate with them in a healthy way. So all that you're saying is so good. And I definitely want to get into, you mentioned that you are a worship pastor. You were, and that's actually where I learned about you, because you and Scooter and Josh Overton, like we did Crossroads. I think was it Crossroads? Or Code Red. There we go. Code Red and all of that. So I saw bits and pieces of you and Josh Overton and obviously Scooter, but I really want to get into your story, your Jesus story on being 18 full-time in ministry, like high school and Jesus. We don't really, I mean, who would think that goes together? But from your story and for a lot of people's story, that's what happened. So tell me, did you grow up in church? Was Christ the center of your family's life? And what's just your Jesus story pretty much?
So I'll kind of, if I was to tell you the whole story with details and everything, we'd be here till 4:00 this afternoon. So I'll try to keep it short. So when you say high school and Jesus, that really wasn't the case for me.
Mhm.
I did not grow up in church. I grew up in Southern Virginia, and my life was everything but stable. So my grandfather was a pastor when my mom and my uncle were kids.
Mhm.
And into their teenage life. And then they experienced a really, really traumatic situation inside of their own church that pushed them away from church and away from ministry and for a long time away from God. And so I didn't really grow up in church. It was never a priority. And I wouldn't say that my mom was against it, but she certainly wasn't like for it. And so I didn't have a drug problem where I was being drugged to church every Sunday. That didn't happen. I think I went to like a few VBSs and stuff like that. And kind of how it happened for me, this is really funny. So where I'm from, they had a YMCA, and they used to do dances every Friday night. Back in the day, when I was young, dances were a thing. That was like what everybody's birthday party. They'd rent out the Rescue Squad, or they'd rent out the YMCA or the country club, and like we'd have a DJ and everybody would just dance, and we'd have food, and that was the thing. I don't think it's a thing anymore, but it was the jam back in the day. And so on Friday nights, every Friday at 7 p.m., 7 to 10, they would do a dance at the YMCA, and I would go. I used to be a dancing machine. I'm just going to tell you right now, I could cut a rug. Okay.
I love
Anybody
it.
watching, don't judge me. I can send you videos. Okay.
All right now.
So I used to go to these dances, and I was, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. And, kind of going through a lot in my home. Like my mom, like my real dad wasn't ever in the picture, still isn't, who I consider to be my dad. Him and my mom got married when I was 2. They got divorced when I was 8.
Wow.
She remarried to somebody who was pretty much abusive. And then they got divorced, and then she remarried who I consider to be my dad, and they're still together now. But that's just kind of a picture of just like the instability that was always there. And so there was a lot of kind of, emotional trauma that had happened on the inside of me and in my sisters as well. And so as I was kind of like getting into my teenage years, we moved a lot, kind of all really within the same town. But we would move like once a year. And so we never really had like the stability of even having like a neighborhood that we really loved to be in, except for when I was like super young. And so I kind of met like a lot of different people and got influenced by a lot of different people in different ways. And so, I got into things like pornography, like super early, super early, like way earlier than most people. And, that led to a lot of different things. And then of course, like I kind of got into drugs a little bit, and kind of finding my identity like in the crowd. Never really was one to kind of pave my own way. I was always like, I just wanted to fit in. And so that led me into a lot of different things like fighting and getting in trouble all the time at school. And but this place on Friday nights, this YMCA dance, like that was like probably the most stable thing in my life, which is bizarre. But when I would start going to these dances, and the DJ at the time, he was a teenager. His name was Kendall. And he and I became friends mainly because I was always requesting him to play different songs. And finally, we would just have conversations.
Yeah.
And he invited me to a church, a youth group. And I had no idea what it was, had no idea what to expect, never really even heard of a youth group or, whatever. And so I remember at like 13 years old, like going to this youth group, and it was bananas to me because I didn't understand any of it. I didn't really know anything about Jesus or about God, the Bible. I just knew that like church was kind of a sore subject for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really lean into it too heavy. But what I did find was a group of people that really like took me in and loved me, even as a teenager that was just wilding out, doing whatever I wanted to do. You know, I was attending church, but I wasn't a Christian. You know, I was literally going for girls. I was going for whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I kind of played this idea of church for many years. And then my best friend, who I met at the church, when I was 16, he passed away in a car accident. And I spiraled into like a really, really deep and dark depression. I was addicted to pain pills, and it was just really crazy time. And so I had become suicidal, and eventually what ended up happening was I tried to take my own life. It didn't work. And I ended up going back to that church my senior year of high school. So I pretty much went through most of middle school and most of high school kind of just going and then not going at all. And then in kind of like a desperation moment, ended up going back to this church, and they were having like a youth revival. And this guy who they brought in, I'd never even met this dude, didn't know him. He didn't know me. And he was the one preaching. He was like the evangelist, I guess. And I walked into the service, and I mean, he just started like reading my mail. I mean, pretty much just like, God has a plan for your life. You know, you need to stop running from him. He was with you when you were depressed. He was with you when your best friend died. He was with you when and I'm like, how did this dude know this, And it was just a God thing. And so it was my senior year of high school that I really like surrendered my life to Jesus. It was that night that I surrendered my life to Jesus. And it was crazy. Like, I had always been like a musician. So I'd always been a singer and like a drummer, a guitar player. And so basically after I really got serious about Christ, it was pretty much like, oh, you should lead worship. You're a talented musician. And I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know any different. So I just was like, yeah, let's do it, And so I started playing music with the worship team. And then before I knew it, I was singing on the worship team, and then I was leading worship. And then, long story short, I went to Mid-Atlantic Christian on a basketball scholarship, ended up going back home to Virginia after a year at college. And that's a long story in itself, but ended up going back home and then moving back to Elizabeth City, which is where the college was, because I had met some friends that I really loved, and ended up getting offered a job at a church pretty much when I moved back. So, I mean, I was 18, 19 years old. And that was kind of like the first time that I had ever gotten a job at a church. And that's what I've been doing pretty much ever since. And I think over the last 12 years, you just learn so much. Some people don't. Some people just kind of want to stay in their own, habits and their own mindsets, and they don't really branch out to try to grow and mature and learn from their mistakes. And, a lot of people are really arrogant, and I was too, like tough. But that's what you said earlier, kind of like just about being self-aware. I mean, I learned a lot, and I allowed it to shape me. I allowed God to use that stuff, mistakes that I've made, lack of integrity, lack of character, lack of humility. And I allowed God to use that to kind of shape me into who I am now. And so I've just learned a lot. So that's kind of like my salvation story. It's crazy. Like my family ended up coming back to Christ, which was like, I wouldn't say that it was because of me, but I think God certainly used me to have conversations with them. Doubts that they had, and just hurts and pains that they were kind of experiencing and trying to work through. And so it's awesome, man. Like my grandparents, my papa, who was a pastor, he was probably hurt the most. And now he's like back in church. He's teaching Sunday school and kind of using that gift that God had put in him a long time ago. And he has passed down a lot to me as a pastor, stuff that he kind of learned when he was younger. And that's invaluable to me. I mean, that's stuff that, you can't get at seminary, you can't get, at a conference, when your own grandfather is passing down stuff that he learned, that's really special. So it's all kind of come full circle, which is really good. And so, yeah, that's kind of my Jesus story, without going into too much detail, because again, we'd be here forever, but that's kind of the gist of it. So.
Oh my gosh. Like what? Oh, like we could just talk about your story and there would be so many good things that come from that. Okay, where to start? From the beginning of your story with from a young age of having instability in your home. I think a lot of people can relate to that because we all have different stories, the way that we've been brought up, and there are parents that regret how they raise their children, and there are children who regret how they were raised, and there's a lot of different things that we've endured and experienced that wasn't really ideal. And your story is one of so many. And I think a lot of people can relate, if not even to the whole thing, to parts and bits of your story from very young age, younger than, as you said, most people are introduced to pornography. You were, and that was traumatic for you. I know for my story, I was also introduced to pornography. And for a long time, I had this idea, as many people do, that it's just a guy thing. Like only guys struggle with that. And the Lord allowed me in his kindness. It sounds weird, but being on the other side of it, you can see the kindness of God to allow me as a girl to go through it, to open my eyes to something so much bigger than what I thought. And it does start at a young age and in many ways. And to see you sharing that so boldly shows the victory that comes from it when Christ is attached to it. And I think, that is something that's maybe shielded from a lot of people. So now we have, for you guys listening and watching, you have a man and you have a woman who have dealt with the same thing from a very young age. Mine started in my mind at 6, and from 6 to 16, you're talking about a whole decade of being in pornography, and your story and so many others. Then we journey through your depression and how you were connecting with a person, that person passes away. Now you're traumatic from that experience, and there's drugs, and all the things that you're talking about is so relatable, and hurt and grief and sin and struggle. But throughout it, and with you talking, you see and you hear God, right? He has redeemed all of this. He allowed you to go through it, but he never left you in it. And I think things get hard, but it would be nearly impossible to be victorious if God is not overseeing it. So the fact that we can become victorious over these things, or find freedom after freedom, step after step, is because God is overseeing the whole thing, and the world indeed is actually in his hands. And I just think your story is so beautifully broken, which makes it go straight to the Lord, right? Because it's not in you nor your family that you are able to overcome these situations, and your family is now back to Christ. It's because of Christ himself and his kindness and love for you and your family to bring you back home. And it is full circle. And hearing your story and seeing where you are and watching you from afar, like that's amazing. And then to take an immature 18, 19-year-old who's trying to figure out things, and yet the Lord is using even in that moment, to call you higher and to do things through you and in you that you would have never imagined. It just shows God's goodness, and it does not take us being great in order to be used. It just takes us really, I don't even say being willing, because God will even use us when we're kind of stubborn and a little fighting against him and wrestling with him, because he's so good. He can work even in that. And so we don't always need to be willing to be used. I mean, it's good to have this open hand and open heart to the Father, but even when we're running away from him, he's chasing after us. And that is the beautiful thing about God. So many beautiful things about the Lord, but your story really highlights how amazing the Lord is, and how he uses every bit of struggle that we have to encourage someone. Like even now, but also to bring him glory, which is what your story is doing. So good. So good. There was so much more that you said, and I just can't even remember it all, but it's on tape, so that's good.
Yeah.
we can rewind and go back and just listen
There
and
you
take
go.
notes. But man, so good. Okay, so I definitely want to get into the influence leadership. When you think of influence, what or who comes to mind? You mentioned that influence leadership and culture, all that is like what you're passionate about. So I'm just really interested to see what is your idea of influence or what comes to mind.
This is a loaded question. All right. So influence, right? I think the word influence has taken on a different meaning to our society, particularly like in the last 10 to 15 years, right? Like we've seen a huge communication shift of how we as human beings like communicate with one another. It used to be, if you want to contact me, call me on the phone or, call my house phone or like page me or send me a letter in the mail. And now it's like everything is at your fingertips, right? And so with that comes a lot of different elements that are introduced into the picture that I don't think that we as humans really were ready for. And so I think technology is kind of like progressed faster and further than we could even keep up with, honestly. And I think that the reason why I'm saying that is because the word influence used to mean something completely different than it does now. I think, 15 years ago, the word influencer that is used in the context it is now wasn't even a thought, and I think it's ironic that there are thousands and thousands of people in the world who literally make money by being an influencer. And it's interesting, like when I'm watching one of these influencers, not all like I there's nothing wrong with it, right? There's nothing wrong with influencers. I think there is a space for them. But more often than not, I find myself asking internally, what are you influencing? Like, I know that you say you're an influencer, but what are you influencing? Right. Like, now, don't get me wrong. Like, I enjoy watching some of these people, just as much as anybody else. I enjoy watching people kind of walk through what they do with their day, or like showing their houses off or showing their cars, or, like gamers and streamers, like, and I'll get into that here in a little bit, but like, I think that there is a really big space for that. But my question always boils down to like, what are you influencing? Because I think a lot of people confuse popularity with influence.
Wow.
Just because you're popular doesn't mean that you're influential. And so for me, like, I'm less interested in using influence to impress people. And I'm way more interested in using influence to impact people.
Wow.
And I think that there is a vast majority of people who say they're influencers, or they say they have influence, but they use that to impress people. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, you're not really making a difference by just impressing anyone. You know what I mean? And so for me, when I think about the word influence, like when somebody, is standing up at the front of the room when I'm in a casket, and they say TJ was an influential person, I don't want that to mean that a lot of people knew who I was. What I want it to mean is that the people who knew who I was were impacted by my life.
Okay.
By how I lived, by how I spoke, by how I lived this thing out, by how I was a dad, by how I was a husband, by how I was a leader, by how I loved people and loved God, and, just did everything to the best of my ability and through God's grace to live this thing out. And so what I've kind of learned in 12 years of ministry is that there are a lot of young people they're like youth pastors, and they're on TikTok and they're on Instagram, and they're all about the likes, and they're all about the comments, and they're all about the reshares, but they're not about the life.
Mm.
They're not about it. Like, because everybody wants to shine bright like a diamond, but they don't understand that diamonds have to be cut.
Hey, okay.
They don't understand the process.
Yeah.
There are so many people who are they're walking into influence prematurely without ever going through the process.
Mm.
And so that's why you see a lot of people. I was one of those people. That's where I'm speaking from now. Like, this whole idea of being self-aware and growing from your pain, that is the big, like, I don't have anything to brag about. What I have to say is that if you don't learn it early, it's going to teach you eventually. Right. And then you're either going to bow to that, like you're going to submit to the cutting, or you're not. But eventually you're going to get cut either way. And so for me, early on, I was all about the likes and the comments and the reshares. I wanted to be popular. I wanted people to know who I was. And that stemmed from my childhood. That stemmed from wanting affirmation because I didn't get it. Right. And so that was like my whole MO. I loved Jesus. And it wasn't like that my intentions were not pure, but we as human beings, we have to check ourselves. And if we don't check ourselves, we can find ourselves kind of getting down that slippery slope real fast. And for me, it became more about how many, when I go to this conference next month and I meet all these youth pastors and they ask me how many students do I have, can I confidently say that I have more students than them? Can I confidently say that I'm putting on this conference, or I'm having this guy come in, or I'm doing this? It's stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, who is that impacting? You know what I mean? Like, if you're not actually impacting people, then it doesn't matter. It's all just for impression. And so I think when I think about the word influence, that's what I think about. I think about, just because you're popular doesn't mean you're influential. Just because you have a platform doesn't mean that you're stewarding it well. And so I would encourage anybody that wants to have influence, go through the process, know what it means to have influence with people. It's dirty. It's messy. There are moments where you are going to get calls in the middle of the night to go to a hospital, to be with a student or somebody that just tried to commit suicide, because you're influential over them.
Yeah.
The difference between whether your influence equals impression or impact is whether you get out of the bed, put some clothes on, and go to that hospital.
Wow.
Are you about it, or are you not? That's my question for people who are influencers. And because it's a lot more than just a platform.
Yeah.
And so when I think about people who are influential, early on, I think I looked up to a lot of people from afar. And as I get older, I learned not to do that anymore. And that is so counterintuitive for a lot of people, because a lot of people, they look up to this person and this person, but they've never met that person. They don't really know that person. Right. But some people go to the extreme to put that person on a pedestal, and then when that person falls, it's like
devastating.
It sends them in a tailspin. They don't know what to do. That's happened with me. And so I've learned to not do that. I've learned to allow the people who have impacted me the most be the most influential to me. There are people that I glean from. I respect their gifts. I respect their ability to communicate, to lead, to preach, to teach the word, but they're not role models for me. Because at the end of the day, I don't know them.
Good.
And I want to know the people that are influencing me and impacting me. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, So there's a lot of people that I can think about that have influenced me up close, and that have impacted my life and kind of gotten me to a place where I am now. And so, but they're typically not on the internet.
That's so good. I honestly, dude, like what? Like bars again. Um, so and what you're saying is really we as a people, as a generation, as a church, also is to redefine influence, right? Let's put influence where it needs to be and define it in the way that it should be and not in the way that it is right now, which is if I have this number of followers, this number of likes or views, then therefore I am popular, influential, but that's not impactful. I think the way that you define influence is very key. It's, are you impactful or are you just impressing people? And that is a self-reflecting question for myself, for you, as you have already talked about. Like, this is something that you have walked through. This isn't just something you're spouting out. This is like your life. This is your personal conviction and your growth in that. So for me and for so many others is, how do you define influence? Are you impactful? Are you just impressing people? Um, the next thing that you're talking about is, we see so many people being influential in the world because they're sharing this or sharing their lives or whatever, but we don't know them. And I love what you said, because it brought to my mind what I told my mom months ago. I said, because I was struggling with seeing people thrive in what I desire to accomplish. And I was like, wait a minute, what I see is what they put out there, right? Which is the polished, perfect, edited versions of their lives. It's everything that we see when we scroll, when we view it on TV, it is what they want to show. Yeah. And I compared my imperfect, I know what I do, I know what I don't do, to their edited, polished, perfect lives. And so you cannot compare to what is not always 100% true, right? You can't compare your 100% truth to their 50% showcase. And I think this is where we begin to misdefine the we begin to misdefine, or is it misdefine? What, that's not the word. Like, not define correctly influence, because we associate it with something that's not actually impactful. And just everything that you're saying is good. The fact that, like, you personally do not idolize some people who you do not work with or that you do not do life with in your day to day, because we do not know these people, but we do know the people that we walk with day to day. And if they are impacting our lives because they're there for us, that's where true influence comes in. And the example that you gave of if a student is in the hospital, are you going to get up and go to that hospital, or are you going to stay where you are? And that can define the heart of your behind your influence. Like, are you actually, impactful or impressing?
Yeah. It's super easy for a youth pastor, in that particular example. It's super easy for a youth pastor to go, oh, buddy, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, I'm praying for you. Mm-hmm. And then they hang up the phone and roll back over and go to sleep.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, to me, like, unless you have something dire going on that there's just no way that you can go to this hospital, like, that to me speaks to the heart of what you are really after. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because if you were really after impacting people, you're going to get out of that bed. Mm-hmm. You're going to go to that hospital. You're going to sit with them for 2-3 hours. Right. You know what I mean? Like, maybe all night if you have to, whatever. To me, like, that's the difference between what Jesus would have done and what a Pharisee said they would have done. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think, we kind of live in this world of show the best, hide the rest. And I think it's really easy for us to compare, I think Stephen Furtick said this like years ago, and it's just always something that stuck with me. And I think it stuck with a lot of people, is like, you can't compare your behind the scenes to somebody's highlight reel, you know? And it's just so true. It's the truth. You don't know what people are going through. You don't know what they're dealing with. I mean, I'm telling you, and I won't say specific, but there was somebody that I really really for a long time looked up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know this person. I mean, I had seen them preach several times, like up close, you
Right.
know, at a local on a local level, and they moved away and they started pastoring a church, and they were a freaking celebrity status
Mm-hmm.
pastor, and they fell. They had
Mm-hmm.
something happen, and that was like kind of like the last straw for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I could name 5, 6, 7 huge name pastors that I've like looked up to that have just all just, you know, and I'm not mad at them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not upset with them. Like, we're human, you know,
Right.
like things happen. But it did make me kind of like look within my own self and go, TJ, like, have you put too much stock into people that you don't know?
Wow.
Have you invested too much of your emotional energy into being influenced by these people and you don't really know who they are?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of like when that last one that I was just talking about, when that happened, I was like, you know what? There are people that have impacted me far more in depth and more honestly, like
Yeah.
in my own life, um, that I do life with every day,
Wow.
that I don't have to wonder, like, what are they doing? You
Mm-hmm.
know? And that's what I've chosen to kind of set a boundary in my own life, just to go,
Yeah.
you know what, like, I do life with people who have impacted me way more, and I'm just gonna let those people
Mm-hmm.
be who I look to and who holds me accountable and who I hold them accountable. And to me, like, that's just healthy. It's just
Mm-hmm.
healthy. I think a lot of young people, especially teenagers now, man, with social media being so heavy in the
Right.
mix, it's so easy to follow all these people, and you're like looking into their lives every day, but you don't really know them. And
Right.
then, you know, they can't impact you that far away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can say stuff, I think, and that they can do stuff that I think will speak to you, but at the end of the day, you got to find people close to you
Yeah.
that can do that too, you know.
Sure.
So that's kind of like my spiel about influence. It's not popular,
Yeah.
but I think it's appropriate.
It's so good though. I think it's so good. And also even taking it right. So this is something that you have learned, that you've walked in, that you have grown from, but to the person, to the people who are still there, the battle, the wrestling between, hey, I would love to be um, influential, right? Let's define it. Let's redefine influence as being that of impact, not of that as impression. That's so good to me. Like that's just mind blowing. Second thing is you can have people who are popular to many to tune in, whether it's sermon, podcast, all of that. But it's also important to have people around you in your day to day who are impactful for good as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Facts.
So we need to redefine. We also need to surround ourselves with godly, um, God glorifying community. And then three, understand that you're human. The battles that we have um, are going to happen, right? And I think for me or for people who struggle with, that's another struggle I've got, right? Like this is the world that we live in. We live in a
Yeah.
fallen world. We are humans, fleshly beings. We're going to struggle. Like we know this. Jesus says this, and it should not be a shock when another thing comes about, or maybe you go, like something happens, or a mindset, a thought process comes. Like if you are struggling, you can go to the Father and you can go to people. This is why it's important to have people around you who can uplift you and speak into your life and all of that. So I think those three things of redefining influence, surrounding yourself with godly community that you get to walk life with day in and day out. You know their lives, they know your lives, but you also have to have the understanding that you're human and we're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And so if we struggle with redefining influence, that's going to happen. Let's get back to the right posture that we're supposed to have. If we're struggling with gossiping, let's get back to where we're supposed to have, you know what I mean? So I never want anybody to think that it's either hot or cold. But like you said, it is a process, and that process is not beautiful. It's not pretty. It ain't cute. It's not post worthy. None of those things for the process. It's messy. It's stinky. It sucks. Like nobody wants to
Yeah.
go through the refinement that
Right.
comes with attaching yourself to the Father. But we see in scripture and even in other people's lives, your story, when you are refined by the Lord, all the things that you shared were not good. They weren't cute, they weren't post worthy, but the refinement of God, the attachment of God has made it good. And so I think for anybody who wants to be influential, wants to be a leadership, or is already in those roles and way of living, there is a process that we can go about even now, and allowing the Lord to personally convict and correct you and the way that you go. But I just think everything that you're saying is so good. And it is a thought, and a mindset that many, myself included, have missed. So now that we are made aware, let's go forth. And this should be that's what conviction is all about, or a challenge is all about, is to redirect us back to the right path and never to condemn us to keep us where we are. So I think that's what your story is sharing. And definitely for you guys listening and watching, never be like so convicted to where you're bound, but conviction is actually to liberate us, right? And so let's just redefine that influence, and let's be impactful and answer those 2 a.m. calls if we need to, or do those things because the kingdom of God is the goal, right?
Yeah.
The salvation of men is the goal. If we lived the way that Jesus has, which is sacrificial, open hand, I'm here for you genuinely, then we would see a difference in the world. And this, again, we have to understand we're human. So it's not gonna be easy, right? It's not gonna be easy to be influential because you're impactful. It's not gonna be easy to be a leadership because you're serving people. But attaching yourself and surrounding yourself with the right people is going to help you become
Yeah.
better, you know?
Yeah.
So good. So
100%.
good. Next one, I'm pretty sure this might be, did we go with who has influenced you the most, why and how? We kind of did though, because you said like the people around you, but if you want to
Yeah.
elaborate more on that, you definitely can.
Yeah. I mean, I'll kind of go into some of the people that are in like my circle,
Yeah.
right? That like, and why they influence me,
Mhm.
why they've impacted me. I think two people I've already kind of talked a little bit about both of them is my mom
Mhm.
and my grandfather, my papa. And they've impacted me in different ways than some of these other people have. I think the thing that I saw with my mom's not perfect, right?
Mhm.
My mom's got a lot of stuff, just like we all do,
Right.
right? And my mom, though she has instilled inside of me a grit that I wouldn't have learned anywhere else. I think it's a part of my makeup. It's part of my DNA is that she has instilled in me this resolve that no matter how hard it gets, like you just got to keep going.
Mhm.
No matter how hard you're kicked down, there you just got to find a way to make it work. And that has been something for me that I've always felt like I've done a really bang up job on. I've
Mhm.
always been real gritty. I'm not going to let something small stop it from happening. I'm going to do whatever needs to be done. And my mom has kind of instilled that in me. She's also instilled in me just how to love people. My mom has always been somebody in my life that pretty much ever since I've been in the world, she has always had somebody in our house,
Mhm.
always, whether it was family member, a friend, kids. I mean, friends from school. There was always like if somebody had an issue, if somebody had a struggle, she was there. And even when they would screw her over, like
Mhm.
she would still be there for them. And that is just like my mom's calling card. Like everybody knows, my mom would literally give you everything, like in the drop of a hat, and she wouldn't mind dropping it.
Mhm.
Like that's just who she is. And so those are like some really big things that she's instilled in me, and that's impacted me a lot. I've just kind of seen her walk through things that a lot of people wouldn't have made it through.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have. And so that's real big. My papa, I think, has impacted me the most. My grandfather was a Vietnam vet, and then a pastor and a
Wow.
musician, and just kind of like the patriarch of our family. And he just always made it clear that family was first.
Mm.
And I think, especially in ministry, right? And I will just go ahead and say this out the gate. For many years, I sacrificed my family on the altar of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was always there to go, TJ, you need to get your mess in order.
Mm.
Like, because at the end of the day, that church may not be there,
Right.
but your family will,
Mm.
you know? And I think that was always real big for that. That's something that I've just started to kind of really lean into and learn. And kind of over like the last 2 years, I think it's been like where I really started leaning into like family, like my wife and my kids, like they matter more than anything outside of God. You know what I mean? Like they matter more than anything outside of God, because at the end of the day, again, like the church may not be here, but my kids and my wife will be, and they've got to know that I am there. And so that was like something that my papa like really instilled in me.
Yeah.
But also like grace for people.
Mm.
My grandfather was always the type that he would have a conversation with anybody, no matter what their stance was, no matter who they were, where they've been, what they've done. There was always a place at his table, even when he wasn't like following Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I always really respected that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of something in me, like as a leader and as somebody that, wants to impact people, I think a big part of kind of the journey that I've walked is that I've always stood up for people that I feel like they couldn't stand up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I've always spoken out on issues that a lot of people were afraid to speak out against.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gotten me a lot of backlash, and it's okay. Like I'm cool with it. I'm built for that. You know what I mean? Like it's really okay. But that all started with my grandfather. Like he really instilled in me, like, stand up for what's right, outside of those two, I think people kind of in my friend circle, and I won't elaborate too much on every person, but just kind of some things that I've learned from each one. So who I consider to be like my spiritual leader, like my pastor, his name is Albert Almore, Pastor AB. And he is the thing that I can say about him is that he is who he says he is.
Wow.
You meet a lot of pastors, and there's a lot of times, and not all the time, but a lot of times where you're like, who are they, like, for real? Like behind closed doors, like, who are they? But this dude is who he says he is all the time. And he's one of the best husbands, one of the best dads, and can preach the paint off the walls. But at the end of the day, like, it's not about that for him. Like, he just literally loves people and loves God and loves his family, and integrity is his MO. Like he is who he says he is. And I've always just really appreciated and loved that about him. And that's probably the biggest thing that he's taught me. And how to overcome like adversity has been real big with him. My youth pastor growing up, I had his name is Chafik Lasawi. He was from gosh, my brain just went blank. Oh my gosh. Morocco. He's from Morocco.
No.
And so the church that I got saved in, he was the youth pastor, and he would always tell me, he would always say, TJ, you're super, super, super talented. You're super gifted. And when your character lines up with your gifting, God's going to open a lot of doors for you.
Wow. So,
and when I was a teenager, I did not understand what that meant. I had no clue what that meant, because as far as I could tell, my talent and my gifts were already opening up a lot of doors.
Mm-hmm.
But my character would kick me out of those doors real quick.
Wow.
And so he would always tell me, TJ, you're super talented, you're super gifted, but when your character lines up with that gifting, not only will the door be open, but you'll actually be able to stay in the room. And I didn't understand that until like, I don't know, like late 20s up until now, you know. And so that's a huge lesson that I learned. A lot of lessons that I want to just kind of say this to anybody who's watching. You will be taught a lesson that you never understand, that you may not ever think you'll understand until later. And then like that is the very definition of like somebody planting a seed and then somebody else watering it. And that was a seed that he planted in me when I was 16, 17 years old that I didn't understand, didn't get it, didn't understand what it meant at all. But now that I'm 30, I get it, you know. Outside of that, I think I got 4 friends that are very close to me, and I've got a lot of friends that I'm close with, but these 4 people in particular have taught me a lot, and I look up to them in many different ways. And I think you know, we've always just kind of kept it real with each other. And those people are Corey Myers. He is the worship and youth pastor at Temple City. He's been a really good friend of mine for a long time. And then Justin Mitchell, Josh Overton, and Ben Warwick. Those are 4 people that have just really, really impacted me. And I was talking about gaming and streaming earlier, and I said I'd come back around to that. And so that's what I meant by right now. So Justin Mitchell, I don't know, you might have remember him. He came to Code Red.
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah.
Premises was his name at the time.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was a Christian hip hop artist for a long time, and then kind of switched directions, and he got into like gaming and like streaming, and that's what he does full time. And one thing I love about Justin is he always stewards the influence that God gives him to go towards the mission of the kingdom of God. No matter what it is, whether it's music, whether it's Comic Con, whether it's dressing up like a Power Ranger and going downtown to Raleigh to pray for people. Like we literally did that. Or like, you know, playing video games online and literally giving people the gospel while he's doing it. And that's what he does now. And so I've always just really admired his creativity and just stewarding the influence that God has given him, no matter what the platform looks like, to always come back to the main thing, which is Jesus and the gospel.